Time. I'm going to finish. Hello, everyone. I'm coming with something new. In line of what uh, the world is going through with the election of America, it was a hard fight because everybody seemed like they wanted to get involved, and it brought out the worst in all of us. I don't think nothing good came out of this election. I think it just brought the worst out of all of us. Yes. But I want to start something new. I want to get a reading group that I have been doing for a while. And this is the time, I think this is the best way to get it started. Is I'm reading out of this history book. Now, this history book, I've had it for over 20 years, and it has a little bit of everything in it. They don't have history books like this no more. And in line of how people are feeling, a lot of people are feeling more lost than ever. A lot of people are feeling like they don't know where they belong. A lot of people feel like they don't have a country anymore. Um, I'm hearing some crazy talk on some of these YouTube. Like Roland Martin had this one that says, uh, "Here is your king that you voted for." Oh my goodness, come on! I would never, ever, ever put his name and king in the same sentence. Then you have this other one. What is his name? Oh, I forgot his name. Doggone it. Talking about America is MAGA now. No, it's not. Y'all give them too much credit. Okay, but we're going to get started. I'm going to read only 30 to 45 minutes at a time. And I'm welcoming any comments or questions. So this is, let me see, a history of world societies. Let's see. This came out in 1961. And so it's pretty old. But I'm going to start. If anybody would like any copies so they can read along with me, just let me know. Okay. In the Western Hemisphere and in Australia, as in Europe, the 19th century was a period of nation building, geographic expansion, and industrial and commercial growth. Waves of immigrants moved from Europe and Asia to the Americans and to Australia. The millions who braved the oceans populated and built new nations and linked the Western Hemisphere and Australia with the rest of the globe. The countries of North and South America became highly diverse, ethnically and culturally, and the issue of race created serious tensions throughout the hemisphere. In the United States, it helped to bring on the Civil War. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, European immigration directly affected the ways with which the United States and Latin American nations coped with racial situations. At the end of the 18th century, Canada and the countries of South America remained colonies. The European mother countries looked on the democratic experiment of the infant United States with suspicion and scorn. The island continent of Australia, remote from Europe and economically undeveloped, served as a dumping ground for English criminals. By 1914, the Latin American states, Canada, and Australia were enjoying political independence and playing a crucial role in the world economy. The United States became a colosseum on which the old world depended in the First World War. Okay, here's some questions we could uh, keep in mind. Why and how did the Spanish colonies of Latin America shake off European domination and develop into national states? What role did the concept of manifest destiny play in the evolution of the United States? How did slavery affect blacks in the United States? How did the Americans in Australia absorb new peoples, and what was the social impact of the immigrants? What geographical, economic, and political conditions shaped the development of Canada? What factors aided the economic growth of Australia? These are among the questions that this chapter addresses. Latin America, 1800 to 1929. In 1800, the Spanish Empire in the Western Hemisphere stretched from the headwaters of the Mississippi River in present-day Minnesota to the tip of Cape Horn in the Antarctic. According to the Kentucky statesman Henry Clay, within this vast region we behold the most sublime, and interesting objects of creation. The loftiest mountains, the most majestic rivers in the world, the richest mines of precious metals, the choicest productions of the earth. Spain believed that this great wealth existed for its benefit, and Spanish policies fostered bitterness and the desire for independence in the colonies. Between 1806 and 1825, the Spanish colonies in Latin America were convulsed by upheavals that ultimately resulted in their separation from Spain. The Latin American wars were revolutions because the colonists were revolting against the domination of Spain and fighting for direct self-government. They were wars of independence because the colonies were seeking economic liberation and management of their own commercial affairs. They were civil wars because the social and racial groups were fighting one another. The Creoles, people of Spanish descent born in America, resented the economic and political dominance of the Peninsulars, as natives of Spain or Portugal were called. Peninsulars controlled the rich export import trade, intercolonial trade, and the mining industries. At the same time, Mezzios of mixed Spanish and Indian background and mulattoes of mixed Spanish and African heritage sought an end to their systematic subordination. Between 1850 and the worldwide depression of 1929, the countries of Latin America developed into national states. The predominant factors in this evolution were the heritage of colonial exploitation, a neo-colonial economic structure, massive immigration from Europe and Asia, and the fusion of American, Caucasian, African, and Asian people. The origins of the revolutions. Because of regional, geographic, and racial differences of Latin American movement for independence took different forms in different places. Everywhere, however, they grew out of recent colonial, colonial economic grievances. By the late 17th century, the Spanish colonies had achieved a high degree of economic diversity and independence. The merciless imperialism of the days of Hermano Cortes and Francisco Pizarro, which held that the colonies existed for Spain's financial benefit and should be economically dependent on Spain, has faded away. The colonies have become self sufficient producers of foodstuffs, wine, textiles, and consumer goods. What was not produced domestically was secured through a healthy intercolonial trade that had developed independently of Spain, despite formidable geographic obstacles and colonial policies designed to restrict it. In Peru, for example, domestic agriculture supported the large mining settlements, and the colony did not have to import food. Craft workshops owned by the state or by private individuals produced consumer goods for the working class. What was not manufactured locally was brought from Mexico and transported by the Peruvian merchant marine. By 1700, Mexico and Peru were sending shrinking percentages of their revenues to Spain and retaining more for public works, defense, and administration. The colonies lived for themselves, not for Spain. The reforms of the Spanish Bourbons radically reversed this economic independence. Spain humiliating defeat in the War of Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1713, prompted demands for sweeping reform of all Spain's institutions, including colonial policies and practices. To improve administrative efficiency, the enlightened monarch Charles III carved the region of the modern Colombia, Venezuela, and Ecuador out of the vast viceroyalty of Peru. It became the new viceroyalty of New Granada with its capital of Bogota. The crown also created the viceroyalty of Rio de la Plata, present day Argentina, with its capital of Benu- Benjuares. For more mementos was Charles III's radical overhaul of colonial trade policies to enable Spain to compete with Great Britain and Holland in the great 18th century struggle for empire. The Spanish crown extended the colonies to serve as sources of raw materials and as markets for Spanish manufactured goods. Charles III free trade policies cut duties and restrictions dramatically for Spanish merchants. In Latin America, these actions stimulated the production of crops in demand in Europe, coffee in Venezuela, sugar in Cuba, and throughout the Caribbean, hides, leathers, and salted beef in the Rio de la Plata, viceroyalty. In Mexico and Peru, production of silver climbed steadily in the last quarter of the century. Volume of Spain's trade with the colonies soared, a possibility as much as 700% between 1778 and 1788. Colony, colonial manufacture, which had been growing steadily, suffered severely. Better made and cheaper European goods drove colonial goods out of the marketplace. Colonial textiles, china, and wine, for example, could not compete with the cheap Spanish products. For one thing, Latin American free laborers were paid more than European workers in the 18th century. This disparity helps explain the great numbers of immigrants to the colonies. Also, intercolony transportation costs were higher than transatlantic costs. In the Rio de la Plata region, for example, heavy exports, taxes, and light import duties shattered the wine industry. Geographic obstacles, mountains, deserts, jungles, inadequate natural harbors also frustrated colonial efforts to promote economic integration. Having made the colonies dependent on extensive Spanish goods, however, Spain found that it could not keep the sea routes open. After 1789, the French Revolution and Neapolitan wars isolated Spain from Latin America. Foreign traders, especially from the United States, swarmed into Spanish American ports. In 1796, the Matrix government lifted the restrictions against neutral trading with the colonies, thus acknowledging Spain's ability to supply the colonies with needed goods and markets. All these difficulties spelled disaster for colonial trade and industry. At the end of the 18th century, colonists also complained bitterly that only peninsulars were appointed to the Aldices, the colony's highest judicial bodies, which also served as counsels to the viceroys and other positions in the colonial colonial governments. According to the 19th century Mexican statesman and historian Lucas Alaman, 1892 to 1853. Latin America before independence. Consider the factors that led to the boundaries of the various Spanish and Portuguese colonies in North and South America. It's really strange that how it changed. Hmm. And how it has changed, that how bad it has gotten between these the Western Hemisphere and Australia. And if you notice, other places how this they have affected the rest of the world. Hmm. From 1751 to 1775, only 30% of appointees to the Audiencia were Creoles. To the Creole elite of Spanish America, the world seemed upside down. Creoles hungered for political office and resented their successful Spanish rivals. Madrid Madrid's tax reforms also aggravated discontent. In the 1770s and 1780s, the Spanish crown needed income to finance imperial defense. Colonial ports had to be fortified and standing armies built. Like Great Britain, Spain believed its colonies should bear some of the cost of their own defense. Accordingly, Madrid raises the prices of tobacco and liquor and increased the alcabala, a sales tax of Arabic origin on many items. Improved government administration made tax collection more efficient. Creole businesses and agricultural interests resented the crown's monopoly on the tobacco industry and opposed new taxes. In the 13th America in the as in the 13 North American colonies a decade earlier, protest movements in Latin America claimed that the colonies were being taxed unconstitutionally. Merchants in Boston and Philadelphia had protested taxation without representation. The Spanish colonies, however, had no tradition of legislative approval of taxes. Creole merchant leaders argued instead that relations between the imperial authorities and colonial interests stayed on and even killed through consultation and compromise, and that when the crown imposed taxes without consultation, it violated ancient constitutional practice. The imperial government recognized the potential danger of the North American example. Although Spain had joined France on the side of the rebel colonies against Great Britain during the American Revolution, the Madrid government refused in 1783 to grant diplomatic recognition to the new United States. North American ships calling at South American ports had introduced the subversion writings of Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson. For decades, the ideas of Voltaire, Rossi, and Montesquieu had been trickling into Latin America. In 1794, the Columbia Antoine Naranjo translated and published the French Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. By 1800, the Creole elite throughout Latin America was familiar with liberal Enlightenment political thought. The Creoles assumed, however, that the rights of man were limited and they did not share the rights with Indians and blacks. Okay, so we've been dealing with this for a long time, the rights of human beings. For some people have elevated themselves above others to the point where they say who has rights and what rights. So it's best that we realize and understand the world that we're living in. And not to one time think that it's supposed to be that way. That we are supposed to let it be that way. Everybody is born with the God-given rights that all human beings should have. So I'm gonna end now, but this is a real important study because this is just pretty much telling us how nations became and how the people that instituted, instigated, and perhaps wrote the emblem for these nations to be. Now, next we're going to read about the race in colonial period. In the race has a lot to do with everything, and I know that you is tired of it, just like I'm tired of them people saying that why you always have to bring up race. That's what stupid people say that has no um, concept of what's the real world. Because race has to do with everything. Race in politics is more important and more broad than life and humanity. Um, Colonial period. Race. The racial complexion of Latin America society is one of the most complicated in the world because few European women immigrated to the colonies. Spanish men had relations with Indian and African women. African men deprived of the black women sought Indian women. Result was a population composed of every possible combination of Indian, Spanish, and African blood. Okay, that sounds interesting. Yeah, wow. And see, a lot of us, especially as Black people, we don't study on that. We have so many Black scholars that wrote about race, but we refuse to listen to them. We rather listen to these new commentaries that is, really is all about making money. It's not about enlightening the Black community. It's about getting paid. All right. Thank you for listening. I will come back next week and, or maybe tomorrow. I don't know. But we're going to read some more. This is really interesting. Thank you for listening. Have a great, wonderful day.